Welcome, everyone, to Double Take, an NFL podcast streaming everywhere you get podcasts and also on YouTube. I'm your host, David, joined by my brother, Daniel, and our good friend, Steven Savage. How are you guys, man?
Doing good.
Awesome.
Excited to be back, man. Fired up.
It's going to be a good one. It's going to be a very good one. This is also the very last episode of Season 2. Season 3 starts with our next episode as we head into the off season. And so we're going to be talking about a couple of different things, more of that to come later on in the show. But obviously, we just came off the Super Bowl this past Sunday where the Kansas City Chiefs defeat the San Francisco 49ers. They come back from 10 points down to win 25-22 in overtime with the new overtime rules, winning their third Super Bowl in 4 years, and then winning back-to-back for the first time since New England did it in 2004. Patrick Mahomes finishes the game with 333 passing yards, 66 rushing yards with 2 touchdowns and an interception. A lot of other different variables, a lot of different things happened in the ball game, and we'll talk about it. But first, let's start with San Francisco. They had a 10-point lead. They had the momentum, but then the offense stalled out and the defense finally got gassed. But Savage, I'm going to start with you, and then I'll kick it over to Daniel. Savage, what is the biggest reason for the San Francisco 49ers collapsing?
I'm just going to say from what I saw. First half, I saw a lot of Christian McCaffrey. I saw a lot of runs. I saw a lot of passes out of the backfield. In the third quarter, I saw a lot of Brock Purdy. I saw a lot of him throwing the ball around. They weren't running the ball. And I don't understand because they were running on Kansas City pretty well. I mean, I know by the end of the game, his average yards per carry was 4. But in the first half, he was running well. I never thought, man, he's not really doing a good job. No, he was cooking them for a minute. And I don't know, man. Did y'all see L'Jarius Sneed's comment after the game about the defensive game plan? We just wanted Brock to throw the ball. I mean, why did that offense slow down? Well, because they took the ball out of the hands of their best skill player on offense and put the ball into the hands of their worst skill player on offense. I believe Jauan Jennings had a better game than Brock Purdy, as crazy as that sounds. Jauan Jennings, if that last play that they had in the fourth quarter when Jauan Jennings got open, and granted, this was not Brock's fault. I believe it was Chris Jones that was right on his face, right?
Right, absolutely.
But I think Brock would make that throw if he had one more second of time. Because it wasn't that hard of a throw, and it was wide open. But if he catches that ball for the touchdown to seal that game, essentially, he's the MVP of the Super Bowl.
100%.
And so Kittle did not have a good game. He got one catch, right? So he didn't play the best. But I think we would all agree that he's a better at his position than Brock Purdy is at his position. Right. Yeah, and then you look at Debo, Ayuk. I mean, relative to the market, they took the hands out of the greatest in the world at what they do and put the hands into, I mean, he's good. He's a good quarterback. But I don't know. It feels like it was another Shanahan trying to be the smartest guy in the room. And it just turns out that, man, you can't beat old corn dog, man. That corn dog motion there at the end. I mean,
you can't.
Every time that San Francisco needed a third down, I need this play. Spagnuolo came up with a crazy blitz, got the pressure home. It was like if San Francisco needed it, Kansas City got it. And then on offense, the flip side, if San Francisco needed a stop, Andy Reid called the perfect play. So I think it was two things. They got the ball out of the hands of McCaffrey, and secondly, just I don't know, man. Shanahan, it's crazy that he even got this far with that quarterback, but it's not enough to get you over the hump in the big game.
And I think for me, I agree with almost everything that you said. I think for me, and to put it into context, I was watching the game with my dad. My dad, he's a very
David will tell you, any quarterback that plays for the 49ers that isn't Joe Montana, he grades especially hard. That's just the way that he is. But it was evident in that game in the third quarter, like you were saying. Every drive in the third quarter, my dad and I, we both said it together. Why is CMC not getting the football? There's no reason for him not to get the football. Did he look at Kyle the wrong way? Did he make him upset in some type of way? Because to me, it's unfathomable how the best player on your football team doesn't get the football. You're telling me that in 3 straight drives, 9 plays, he gets the ball once. And not only was it once, but when he got the carry, it was in an I formation that it was obvious that they were going to run it. And so I agree with you, Sav. I think Kyle Shanahan was trying to prove to the world that he's the smartest guy. Look what I did with the 7th round draft pick, and try to be cute. And he said, well, we ran the ball once, but we ran the ball once, but look, it got stopped. Yeah, because you ran it out of an I formation where they knew you were going to run the football. I think that's the biggest reason why they lost the game, because I think it might be a different ball game if they did the same thing that they did in the first half, meaning you give the ball to Christian McCaffrey, you let Brock throw it a little bit, but it's still going to go through CMC. Your defense is playing amazing in the first half and throughout the game, I believe, and just take it home. You didn't have to make any adjustments because it was working. And this is how I know it would have worked, because you went back to it in the fourth quarter and it worked. So for me, it is as simple as Kyle Shanahan tried to prove he's the smartest guy in the room, took the ball out of his best player's hand when there was no reason to. That's why they lost the game. So I agree with Savage. Like that is just like the eye test will tell you that was the deciding factor in the game, getting the ball out of CMC's hands.
Man, I want to take both of you guys back to when we did our live stream after the divisional round. And we had a bunch of 49ers fans on the podcast. And I said this one statement, and we went down a rabbit trail for about, as we typically do on this show, for 25 to 30 minutes, because I just said, guys, I'm sorry, but the person that I don't trust the most on the San Francisco 49ers team is not Brock Purdy, but it's the head coach. Because once again, for the third time in the biggest game of the year, you have a lead and Kyle Shanahan blows it. And blows it doing what? Going away for what worked for him in the first half. When you had Jimmy G as your quarterback, and this is why I don't like, I think I was proven right here. You can't fully blame Jimmy G on that one throw in the fourth quarter when they played the Kansas City Chiefs, because guess what they did the entire second half, or let's just go to the fourth quarter. You keep throwing the ball. The exact same thing happened in this football game. Like Savage, you said it correctly. Christian McCaffrey was carving them up. And it was just little things like unfortunately, it was whenever they did put the ball in the air that they had to punt the ball away and they stalled. Christian McCaffrey did fumble in that first drive in the game, which was huge. But when the ball was put in the air and not given to Christian McCaffrey, that's when drives stalled out. That's when things went wrong. That's when the offense sputtered. And what had us saying, man, this is a very boring football game. So Kyle Shanahan, again, for the second straight Super Bowl, takes the ball because, and let's even go deeper into this, okay? Patrick Mahomes gets the ball to come out in the second half. What does he do? Throws an interception. Okay? It was ugly. Now, I didn't know this, but probably this is just because of personal experience. I didn't know this, but I found out in the Super Bowl that when the team turns the ball over, the defense is allowed to stop them from scoring. I didn't know that was possible, but that's what happened. Okay, but in those 3 drives, there was 3 drives that happened for Kansas City to where they turned the ball over, punted the ball. And guess what San Francisco did with it? They gave the ball to McCaffrey, and all those three drives put together, 1 time. That's the story of the ball game. And we're going to talk about this player because I mean we've already talked about him a little bit. We talked about Brock Purdy and how he performed in this and this and that. But I think the bigger issue is the fact that Kyle Shanahan actively took the ball out of McCaffrey's hands, put it in Brock Purdy's hands, and said, "All right, we got to prove to these people, we got to prove that you're an elite quarterback." And they were not able to do it, and it cost them the football game. It's part of the big story, unfortunately.
I mean, what other narrative can you grab other than that?
Right.
I have one.
Yeah, go for it.
I got a narrative you can grab from that. So a couple weeks ago.
Yes, you did.
I don't know if the viewers at home were able to see this part of the show or if our good old pal David edited it out.
I did.
But there was viewers at home, please know, there was a colossal sized argument and fight on this show. And it all happened because I apparently said the egregious thing of Brock Purdy and Jimmy Garoppolo. I said Brock Purdy's a little better, but essentially they're the same guy. And I heard that, look at the game plan. The game plan shows you all the difference. That with Jimmy G, they ran the ball, and he only threw the ball 8 times. And in this Super Bowl, we saw a game plan of Christian McCaffrey cooking, and then they took the ball out of his hands, gave it to Brock Purdy, and he went 3 of 12 on 3rd down with all of those receiving weapons. Kind of sounds like a Jimmy G game plan might have worked for him. It kind of seems like if you called that game as if you had Jimmy G as your quarterback, you would have won that Super Bowl. So I think a narrative might be is, yes, Brock Purdy, and I'll recorrect my take from about a month ago. He is significantly better than Jimmy G. But they're essentially the same guy when it comes to playoff results. You can go to a Super Bowl with them when you have all of that talent with you, and when you only have to pay your quarterback 1/100th of your salary cap, you know, you can build an awesome team. But he's not that guy, at least right now. I can withhold my judgment I'm not saying he'll never be that guy. I have my doubts, and I don't think he will, but I'm not going to say he never will because I don't know. He might turn into that guy. But if he's not that guy right now, and he has all of that team, and he played until his senior year at college, he wasn't a 3-and-out guy, and he kind of was that guy in college who looked good but wasn't good enough to take a team anywhere, and now he's in the NFL, and he takes his team to the Super Bowl, but once he starts getting big boy money here in a few years, you won't be able to keep the full Avengers cast. Is he going to be able
I don't think they're going to keep it next year.
Well, they can't pay him this year.
No, but I'm saying, like, I don't know if they can afford to even keep the team that they have this year.
Oh, yeah, without paying him, you mean?
Without paying him.
So would a Jimmy G-esque game plan, it kind of seems like that's what all 3 of us are calling for. Run the ball, get the ball out of Brock Purdy's hands and run it.
I think it's a game plan for everyone except Patrick Mahomes. Because if you're a team that's known for running the football, most likely you're going to run the ball in situations. For me, it's more of Kyle Shanahan try to prove something else other than, hey, this is what worked for you. I can guarantee you that when Dak Prescott was a rookie in 2016 and they were running the ball all over everyone, the only reason they went to the pass in Dak's first playoff game is because they were down 21-3. But I guarantee you, if they're going through the same thing, they're going to run the football. I'm pretty sure every team, if they're having success running the football, they will stick to it.
Mhm.
I think that's more for me. That's what I believe more than the whole Jimmy G thing. It's not a Jimmy G game plan. Any team that can run the football and is known for running the football and it's working in the biggest game of the year, they're going to stick to it. Kyle Shanahan is the outlier and has proven that in the past 3 years or Super
Yeah.
Bowls he's been in.
Yeah. Yeah. I think, well, let's just dive into Brock Purdy because
Yeah.
obviously there is a narrative going up. This game was crucial for his narrative.
Mhm.
Because we were either supposed to see what 49ers fans want you to believe, and that's that Brock Purdy carried this team to this position, um, or that Brock Purdy benefited from having an elite squad. Uh, and just to give my thoughts on it, I thought Brock Purdy played a good game. Didn't turn the ball over, didn't put it in harm's way. We talked about Chris Jones. There was a couple of times where Chris Jones saved touchdowns, in my opinion, of where the ball was snapped and Chris Jones was already in the backfield, and it was absolutely ridiculous. But I think that still can fall on Brock Purdy, still being young. Kind of what you were saying, Savage, of maybe one day he'll get there. But if I never saw in the game, and people can correct me if I'm wrong, or you guys can correct me if I'm wrong. I never saw Brock Purdy change passing protections in the game.
It's one of those things where historically Kyle doesn't let his quarterbacks change protection. He lets his
Right.
center do it. So that
Right.
I don't. Does that need to change? If I'm
It probably
Kyle,
does, because I
you need
think
to change it, bro. Because
I think
your
there's a
center's
couple. There
obviously
was a
not
couple
getting
of
it done.
situations. There was a couple of situations to where, like, if there was another quarterback in there, let's say a Patrick Mahomes, a Joe Burrow, and I'm only mentioning this game because he did this a lot. Dak Prescott changing the protection at the line based on what he saw. I think that if that would have been in the hands of a Brock Purdy, if he could have done it or if he should have done it, that would have made the difference in the ball game. But also at the end of the day, like, I don't know if I will crucify Brock Purdy for this game, but I think what this game definitely did show was the fact that Brock Purdy wasn't as elite and isn't as elite as everyone was saying that he was. Um, for whatever reason. But I think for me, what I'm taking away from this game more than ourselves is that I've learned from talking with people and reading comments on social media and seeing conversations that we will make the same. I'm going to use the word excuses because that's what I was told that I was making. People will use the same excuses for their quarterbacks, but it not be consistent across the board. Because I think we can look at coaching as a problem for Brock Purdy, his offensive line as a protection for Brock Purdy. But because we will not give that to those players, to other quarterbacks, I'm asking the question, shouldn't it be the same for Brock Purdy? Or is it because we like him and we think he's such a great guy and such a great story that we absolve him from the criticisms that he should be receiving and saying that he's not elite? But that's just what I feel about Brock Purdy. I think he's a good quarterback, like you said, Savage, but he's not elite, not yet. There's only one elite quarterback in the NFL, and we're going to talk about him in a second. But that's definitely Patrick Mahomes. But Brock Purdy, he's not in the same conversation with Mahomes. But Daniel, your thoughts on Brock Purdy's performance?
No, I agree. I think he's a good quarterback. But I do think that he has certain qualities in a quarterback that others don't have. But the talent is not there to it's kind of one of those things like people said about Kellen Moore, where he had a great mind, but didn't have the arm to back it up. I think Brock definitely has a better arm than people give him credit for. He's very accurate. I think his head is there. I think there's still a lot of things that he needs to grow and improve on, I'm with you. I would love to know the reason why Kyle Shanahan, because I heard that he didn't well, I don't know that for sure. I don't know why he doesn't let his quarterbacks change the protection. I don't know why he doesn't do that. But I think he played pretty well despite they're blitzing him 53% of the time, the fourth most percentage for the Kansas City Chiefs this season, and they got a season high 9 pressures that were unimpeded. Like they just went through the line, and so it happened 9 times, which is a season high. So I thought he played well under those circumstances. Debo, he got nicked early in that ball game, and it kind of really hindered him for a majority of the game. I thought McDuffie and Snead, they just clamped and they just held their own against these 49ers receivers. George Kittle was a no-show, but your boy Nick Wright has been saying that for years, that Kittle disappears in the postseason. As great as he is in the regular season, he disappears. And so you have to take that into account as well. And for me, his final 3 drives of the entire game, he was 11 for 16, 133 yards and a touchdown. Now, obviously, Savage pointed out to the point that had he had a second more to throw that ball to either Juwan Jennings, or he had Brandon Ayuk coming open a second later. If he gets more time, he can make that throw. But I think at the end of the day, he's good. I think he can be very good. I don't know if he can be elite. I don't know if he can ever do that, because based on the fact that in Iowa State, this is what I've heard about college quarterbacks, and you guys can tell me if I'm right or wrong about this. They said a 4-year starter, if he starts for 4 years, there's not much that he could grow on based on the fact that he's been a 4-year starter. Now, I know college and NFL, it's different because there's a lot more concepts, there's a lot more terminology that you have to get through, but how much better can he actually get? But I did think with the opportunities that he got, and I think and Nick Wright said this as well. I've been watching a lot of Nick Wright. Thank you guys for turning me on to him. But what he said, the moment didn't seem too big for him. It didn't. Now, if they give the ball more to his running back, I think we may be having a different conversation on the outcome of the game. But I do think Savage is right. We are going to see eventually what he actually is. I think this year it wasn't the time to ask that question, but I feel like with the offseason that the 49ers are about to have, I believe this team is going to look different next year, because you have Trent Williams making $31 million. You have Deebo Samuel making $28 million. You have George Kittle making $23 million. You have Nick Bosa almost making $34 million. Are you going to be able, and Brandon Ayuk is already wanting out of there because, one, he wants his money. They only have $550,000 in cap space. I'm not sure they're going to keep this team together. Now, who would I have? Would I rather have Debo or Brandon Ayuk? I'd rather have Brandon because he's a route runner. And I think Debo got a little bit exposed with his route running or lack of route running when he played an all-pro in McDuffie. So we're going to find out pretty quickly what he can be without weapons. And that's going to be before he even gets his money. But I'm with you guys. I think he's a good quarterback. Definitely not elite. Like David said, I feel like there's very few in the NFL that is elite. But I think he played pretty well. He played pretty well. Better than I thought he would, because I told David, or the day before, I thought it was going to be 31-21 Chiefs, because I thought the moment would be too big for him at this stage of his career. But it didn't seem too big for him. But when you're playing against Patrick Mahomes, you need to have your best day. and you need to be elite. I think you have to be elite to beat Patrick Mahomes. So that was the difference.
Can I posit a question? I don't know if David.
Yeah.
Oh, David, your camera's working. Okay. You were just so still that I thought your camera froze.
Yeah.
Let's say you keep the teams exactly the same.
Mhm.
Chiefs, the Niners. You account for the random injuries. Dre Greenlaw goes down. What's the name of their guard that went down? He goes out.
Oh, I can't. Yeah.
Feliciano gets hurt. He goes out of the game. The only thing you change is Patrick Mahomes is the Niners quarterback and Brock Purdy's the Chiefs quarterback. What's the score of that game?
So I thank you for asking that question. Because I've also been seeing this on social media, and like, Savage, you have no idea how happy I am that you asked this question. Because I heard the same thing, and I'm sorry to do this, but I heard the same thing about you put Brock Purdy on the Dallas Cowboys, what would he do? And you're talking about, if we remember a Miami game, to where multiple times our guard blocked the wrong person, essentially blocked his own teammate and let a free rusher in. And in that game, we lost because of our defense not being able to stop anybody after Dak makes a big play to win it. What I heard from San Francisco 49ers fans is like, see, Dak always chokes in the big game. Now we're talking about a game to where their offensive line was shaky and they're quiet on that subject. Patrick Mahomes was essentially in the first half, and I would say probably the majority of the third quarter, was held in the pocket. I mean, that San Francisco 49er defensive line was coming for him and didn't let, like, the big thing is they didn't let him run out of the pocket too much and actually do what he does best.
They forced him back into the pocket.
The pocket.
Get him off, get him uncomfortable.
If Brock Purdy was on the Kansas City Chiefs, they don't score 25. They might score, I'll be nice and say they'll probably score 16. Clearly, he's not doing what he did on Sunday. Doesn't do that with Kansas City.
Yeah.
What does Mahomes do with that Niners offense?
He says, Kyle, forget throwing it down the field. I'm giving the ball to McCaffrey.
I don't think the game is close, y'all. I think it is an absolute Niners rout if you switch the quarterbacks. I mean, you had Jawan Jennings looking like a good receiver. So you had 5 guys on offense that either are elite or were playing elite in that game. Because Jawan Jennings isn't elite, but he was playing he was throwing touchdowns. And then you have Kittle, who is elite but didn't play elite. But I don't necessarily know if that's entirely on Kittle.
Right.
Y'all, I think that this is an absolute, maybe a 17-point game, 21-point game. I mean, I don't think it's close. I think it's one of the most boring Super Bowls for the opposite reason as why the first half was boring. First half was boring because nobody was scoring. You switch it, I think it's boring because only one team is scoring. I mean, you go from Justin Watson to Brandon Ayuk as your wide receiver too. Yeah, I think that's a little bit of a difference.
Yeah, Danny, do you want to respond to that? Or?
Well, this is more of a taste thing for me, of like the hypotheticals of if this player played with this team. To me, I don't subscribe to it because I'm a realistic thinker, meaning I need scenarios to be real. And the fact of the matter is, if Patrick Mahomes with his $45 million contract goes to the San Francisco 49ers, Debo's not on your team. Brandon Ayuk is not on your team. George Kittle's not on your team. Probably the only guy that's probably on that team is Christian McCaffrey. And so, but I understand what you guys are saying because it's 100% true. I do think it's a kind of redundant question because you're basically just saying who's better, Patrick Mahomes or Brock Purdy. And I think astronomically it's Patrick Mahomes. And so I feel like we're saying the same thing that we've been saying. He's a whole lot better. He can do a whole lot more with less.
I think the point of asking that, though, is the fact of this Brock Purdy narrative where it's just like, you hate Brock Purdy if you don't think he's elite because of what he's done.
Right.
And I think when we're talking about, switching them, I don't know if it's a blowout, but that's just because I want to move on to Kansas City and how they did in this game. That defense is real. Like Daniel said, they were clamping on receivers. They were getting to Brock Purdy. They were making it hard for them to move the ball down the field. Obviously, part of that, and we'll talk about it here in a second, falls to Kyle Shanahan as well for how he called the game. And I think we've already talked about the blame that he gets for this and all of that. But I think Kansas City's defense did a phenomenal job on limiting what Brock Purdy could do because they took time away from him. And for me, I want to be consistent in how I'm evaluating these quarterbacks of saying, listen, if I can give Dak Prescott some passes, especially for the shortcomings of his football team, I have to do the same thing for Brock Purdy. Again, that doesn't change the fact that Brock Purdy's talent level outside of this Kansas City Chiefs team, he wouldn't be in this situation. I think that's okay to say that. I don't think it's disrespectful. That's just the reality of it. But in terms of Kansas City and what they did, Savage, I'm going to start with you here. What is the big reason for the Kansas City Chiefs comeback? I mean, because they were down 10, Patrick Mahomes throws an interception, and we still go to the end of the ball game, and it's 25-22 in overtime, Kansas City. What is the biggest reason for Kansas City on Kansas City's side for this comeback?
I think the reason why is if you look at the Niners and you look at the Chiefs, and I don't think this is going to be an unfair thing to say, one team knows how to win big games, and one team doesn't. You look at the Chiefs, everyone's like, that was a 10-point comeback. I'm like, yeah, that's every Super Bowl Mahomes has won. And then his first Super Bowl, that was every playoff game in that stretch. They were down 10 at home to the Texans. They were down 10 at home versus every team that they played on that first Super Bowl run. So it's like, am I shocked he came back and won? No. Was I nervous when they were down 10? No. There was no part of me that was like, oh, man, I don't know if Mahomes is going to be able to pull this one out. Now, if they went down 17, I'd have been like, okay, that's going to be hard to come back from. But down 10, I trust that defense to make stops, partially because of how good the defense is, partially because I'm not completely sold on Brock Purdy. But then I also trust, like, eventually Mahomes is going to figure this out. You have the greatest offensive coach ever. You have the greatest quarterback ever, which I'm ready to go ahead and say that.
Me too.
I'm a LeBron is the GOAT guy. I don't need to wait to see how many rings you have. The peak of the apex of that player determines his greatness. Mahomes is the GOAT for football. I'm ready to say it. I don't care. And then you have the greatest tight end ever with Kelsey within arguably the greatest offensive system ever, which is this Chiefs offense. I trusted that they were going to be able to put up points eventually. Now, does Dre Greenlaw getting hurt help? Absolutely it does. Does Kelsey have that 20 to 30 yard pickup on the drag where we love mentioning him on this show, where Nick Wright pointed out the advanced stats that was the fastest he's run in a football game in the last 7 years.
That's crazy.
Does that happen if it's Warner and Greenlaw in the middle clouding things up? Maybe not. I don't know. Greenlaw and Warner clouding up the middle. Maybe not. I don't know. But at the end of the day, the biggest reason why it happened is because the Chiefs know how to win these games. They've done it. And NFL fans out there, get used to seeing this. Brady went on a 10-year drought for Super Bowls. There's no way this Chiefs team goes a decade without winning. oh, but they're not going to be able to afford to keep everyone. They already have changed up the team. The first Super Bowl they won was like high flying, no defense. This one is like all defense and just enough offense to make it work. It doesn't. I think Mahomes is so good. I think Reed is so good that regardless of what you put around them, they're going to be able to figure out ways to win. And I have a new rule for double take for myself. And my commitment on double take, my involvement with this show, I have a new rule. Unless if the quarterback lining up against Patrick Mahomes is Joe Burrow, I will not bet against Mahomes in January or February. I'm not saying that I'm never going to be wrong. I'll be wrong at some point. But I'm going to be right way more than I'm wrong. I'm not ever picking against Mahomes in the playoffs, unless if it's against Joe Burrow, partially because Joe Burrow has shown that he can do that, but mainly because Joe Burrow was my college quarterback whenever he was at LSU. I'm an LSU fan. So I'm going to go with Joe Burrow, and I'll take some losses on that if they come. That's why I think they won the game.
Everything you said. And I'll even do one more. After the game, Kyle Juszczyk was asked, "Did you know about the overtime rules?" What did he say?
No.
We didn't know. You asked, was it either Patrick Mahomes or Travis Kelce? Hey, did you know about the overtime rules? We had a dedicated meeting to the overtime rules. We brought referees in. We brought people in to explain every single aspect of what the new overtime rules is. That told me everything I needed to know about this game. That told me everything. Savage said it. One team knows how to win the games. The other team misses blocking assignments, doesn't know the overtime rules, decides to blitz one of the greatest quarterbacks in NFL history in overtime, like 3-4 straight times, doesn't have a quarterback spy on the most slippery running quarterback in the history of this league. That was the difference. This is a team, and I'm with Savage. Everyone wants to cry about the Chiefs potentially being in the Super Bowl for the next 10 to 15 years. Then beat them. Beat them. It's not Patrick Mahomes and Andy Reid's fault that, like Savage said, can win any way that they want to win. You want a high-flying offense with no defense? We got you. When we have the high-flying offense, a bad defense, and the worst offensive line in football, we'll still get there. And you have the best defense in the league and just enough offense for Mahomes to pick you apart, we'll win that way too. If you want to beat him, figure it out. There's only one quarterback that can do that. And I'm with Savage. One quarterback that I believe is the only quarterback that can beat Patrick Mahomes at his apex. That's Joe Burrow. Now my hesitancy to throw Joe in that eliteness is his ability to remain healthy. But even then, it's tough. It's really tough. Am I ready to say that he's a GOAT? I don't know if I'm there yet, but it's close. It's literally 3 quarterbacks at the top and then everyone else like 50 miles below the earth. So I thought that Andy Reid was a huge reason. Huge reason why. Because he got his team ready to play, and we even said it during halftime. People were freaking out online, and the three of us were like, let's let Andy figure this out. Let's help him do that. And so for me, I think this is a team that knows how to win. It really is.
So one of the things I love about this show and why you guys need to watch the live or the video component to this is Daniel is also really good at not showing that he can see what other people are doing, because Savage was just slow clapping him the entire time. Once he said figure it out, Savage, I'm going to let you address that real quick before I go.
I just feel so vindicated. This whole season, I've been the figure it out guy, and y'all said that's such a stupid take. That's so dumb.
I still think it is.
Wait.
Okay, go.
Figure it out. You can't da. And sure enough, whenever we tested that theory, and Daniel, when you're not thinking about how can I just prove Savage wrong, and you're just saying what you know deep down in your heart to be true, you said if you want to beat him, figure it out. Amen, brother. I'm with you. And you said you got to figure it out. You said it a second time. You said it twice. Here's the deal. You're going to say, I said, Shanahan figure it out. I'm talking about coaches to figure it out. It's the whole brain trust of the team that needs to figure things out. So here's the deal. Why am I so happy this show? Because one, I feel like my Brock Purdy take has finally been taken seriously. Secondly, my figure it out take has been taken seriously. Also, the Mavericks traded for PJ Washington and Daniel Gafford, and they're on a 5-game win streak. So that's why I'm happy. Right now, my sports world, if Wisconsin basketball can figure it out, I am on cloud 9, man. Figure it out. If we had episodes for the podcast, today's episode is figure it out. The Chiefs did, the Niners didn't. That's why they won. Double take right there within a segment.
Daniel, go ahead. Go ahead and respond.
I don't think you should feel vindicated. The reason why I said figure it out is because it's impossible, meaning you can't figure it out. That's why I said that, because you can't figure it out. You're talking about a team that had all the weapons, all the pieces, and a cheap quarterback, and they still couldn't beat them. You can't figure it out. There's also instances. The reason why me and David had an issue with the figure it out take is because one of the big things that you live on is the fact that in any situation, you should be able to figure it out. I am as hard on Dak Prescott as probably any person, and David can attest to this, than any person on this planet. He ain't figuring that one out. Ain't nobody figuring that out. When your team lets up 40 points, even Aaron Rodgers couldn't figure it out. Those situations, I believe there's some situations in football where you just can't figure it out. And I believe with Patrick Mahomes and the Chiefs, they're one of those scenarios. You can't figure it out. They're just too good. They're just too great. Because you look at Joe Burrow. Joe Burrow only did it once in the postseason. Only did it once. And when they lost, he threw 2 interceptions.
They've only played twice in the postseason.
I know, and they've been 1-1.
Right. So he figured it out one time.
And he figured it out one time, and the next time that they did it, he couldn't do it.
He had a lead with 30 seconds left. Like, it wasn't that he just...
I know, but he threw 2 costly interceptions in that postseason game.
Yeah.
And my thing is, this is a different Patrick Mahomes than even that year. This is way different. This is different. I think as good as we thought Patrick Mahomes was, as good as we thought he was in 2021 and 2022 when he faced Joe Burrow, the 2023 Patrick Mahomes is even better. And I believe he's going to continue to get even better. So I think it may be out of reach to where even I agree the only one who I think could do it would be Joe Burrow. But like you said, I'm not going to bet on him. I'm not betting against Patrick Mahomes. If anything taught me, I'm with you. If I learned anything from this year, I picked against Patrick Mahomes twice in these postseason. Not because of him, but because of his team, and I felt like his receiving group was going to let him down. But I'm with you. I'm no longer going to bet against him. Never again. Not in January and February.
Was I the only one that picked Kansas City in all 4 playoff games this year? Because David, you picked Baltimore, right?
No, I picked Kansas City. I was
I'm
with
the
you.
only one that picked Baltimore.
Did you pick Bills?
No, I picked Kansas City as well.
And then did you pick Niners?
No, I picked Kansas City.
I think 3 of us picked Kansas City.
I said what I said after coming out of the Super or like heading into the Super Bowl was like, listen, San Francisco should win this game. They have the better roster. They have the better team overall. They should win this game. But Kansas City has the greatest quarterback of all time and arguably the greatest coach of all time as well. I'm not betting against them. And so I did pick Kansas City. I did think it was going to be close, though.
And then you picked them over Miami, I'm sure.
Oh, yeah. I think we all did, yeah.
So here's what I'll say about the figure it out take, is that my take is not anybody in any situation all the time. They have the ability to figure it out. My take is if you're that guy, you can. Some people just aren't that guy. Like, that's why my take with Dak, figure it out, because if he's supposed to be that guy that David thinks Dak is, he needs to figure it out. But if he doesn't, then he's not that guy. Purdy, if you have a 10-point lead and you get the ball with, I think nobody's going to argue. Like, there's a difference between playing a clean game and playing a good game. He played clean. I'm not convinced he played that good, but you had so many opportunities to put that game on ice and you didn't. Mm-hmm. You didn't figure it out. Right. Then you're not that guy yet. You can't. I'm not saying you can't ever be that guy, but if you didn't figure it out, you're not that guy. That's what the figure it out take is all about. If you are who they say you are, figure it out. No excuses.
Yeah, I guess my only thing to say of that is, so I'm going to go on record here. Again, I love Dak. I'm a huge Dak supporter. Dak is not that guy. I don't think in every circumstance he can do that, because we saw that last year against the San Francisco 49ers in the playoffs. We've seen it in my only thing is that, like, we've seen him do it, but not in the postseason, which is what I think what we're talking about in terms of the figure it out take. My thing is, though, no other quarterback has done it other than Patrick Mahomes or Joe Burrow. Because even if we want to say that wasn't, apex Patrick Mahomes, that still was like high scoring Patrick Mahomes, though. And Joe Burrow did what he needed to do. Health is the only concern, I would say, because I think that what everybody wanted Mahomes and Allen to be, Mahomes and Jackson to be, it's the reality of what Mahomes and Burrow is as of right now. Obviously, we're cool on it. It's cooled off because Burrow was hurt this season and Cincinnati wasn't in the playoffs. But my thing is that I think you could say that about a lot of other quarterbacks who are very, very talented, but when it comes to the postseason, like, they haven't done it. But and this is not talking about you, Savage, because I think you're going to agree with me on all these things. I'm just talking about for fans out there in general. I think my biggest problem about the whole Dak Prescott conversation is that we will give passes for everybody else. I mean, fans in general will give passes to Josh Allen because he's oodles talented. They'll give passes to Lamar Jackson because he's a 2-time league MVP. But Lamar Jackson in the playoffs is 2-4. He had the opportunity, and we talked about this. I don't think you were on the show when we talked about it. But Lamar Jackson, we said it together. Like, to us, that game was a figure it out game, because your defense holds Kansas City to 0 points in the second half, and you only score 3 points, and you throw a costly interception in triple coverage that made no sense. So, but we don't hear Lamar sucks talked about after that game. We talked about Josh Allen against Kansas City in the divisional round, where he makes 1 or 2 plays. Yes, we get it. Diggs dropped it. But again, we're talking about figure it out. You have the opportunity. It's there. It's a touchdown if you hit it and you miss it. And Josh Allen against starting quarterbacks in the playoffs is 1-5. And so for me, yes, I'll agree. I think that if you are that guy in almost, and I think you'll say this too, in almost every single circumstance, if you're that guy, you go get it done. We only have one guy in the league who can do that. And Daniel, to address you and your point, I think that's why he's the greatest of all time, because I think he's the only guy in all circumstances who can do it. You're talking about a guy with a struggling offensive line who you're going to have to, on a 4th and 1, is Tom Brady pulling that ball out? Now, he'll do a quarterback sneak, probably.
I wouldn't say
sure.
Kansas City had a struggling offensive line. They were ranked 6th in the National Football League.
But against that San Francisco 49ers defensive line, I mean, they did not play perfectly.
No, they didn't play perfect. No, obviously not. But I think they played pretty well in that game in the moments that they needed to.
Right.
But I mean, Tom, no. Joe, maybe. But
maybe.
But the thing that for me, what's changing and what's pulling me, and I'm not saying that I'm completely out on Mahomes being the GOAT, because I'm not, because there's validity to that. And I think for me, what is most compelling about Patrick Mahomes versus Joe, because I think for me that's who he has to kind of, from in my mind, has to go over before Tom, is the fact of Joe always had weapons. Like we talk about Brock Purdy having a super team, Joe had that in excess. He didn't have all pros on his team. He had Hall of Famers on his team on both sides of the football. And I'm not talking about like 3rd, 4th ballot Hall of Famers. I'm talking about 1st ballot Hall of Famers. Does Patrick have that? No.
He's got Kelsey.
Maybe he has Kelsey. He's got Kelsey, maybe Andy Reid, maybe Chris Jones after, now Chris Jones may be in that conversation now, but 2 Hall of Famers? Is Tyreek's a Hall of Famer? Yeah, but he won 2 Super Bowls without the man. Mm-hmm. So that has to be taken under consideration. For me, that's the most compelling argument for Patrick Mahomes is the lack of all pros, Hall of Famers. I'm just going to go Hall of Famers because I think Brady had all pros on the defensive side of the ball for a majority of his career. Patrick doesn't have that.
This is the first year.
What do you mean this first year?
Well, I mean, this is like the first or second year to where his defense has, but we can say, hey, this is a great defense.
Yeah, and it's more of, this is how I view his defense. The Dallas Cowboys in 2007 had like 7 Pro Bowlers on the defensive side of the ball. Did you trust that defense? No. I think the Patrick Mahomes defense is a collection of players who play well together. Even if there's only 1 or 2 really big names, as a unit, they're solid and you can trust them as a team. So for me, I believe that they're not maybe they won't be as decorated as other great defenses historically, but together they play really well. And that's where I think Patrick's defense is at this moment in time. Now, can they, after a couple years, McDuffie gets more all pros? Like, will he? Sure. But we're talking about right now. Right now. He's not there yet. He played like an all pro. He played like an elite safety.
He made all pro.
No, he wasn't all pro.
He wasn't all pro. Yeah, he wasn't all pro. But is he a Hall of Famer? No, not yet. And so I think for me, that's what's kind of getting me closer to giving Patrick that greatest honor is the fact of how he's doing. So.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I think this Kansas City defense, it's going nowhere. They're also young.
No,
they're young.
They're the youngest defense in the NFL right now.
Right.
Yeah.
And so I think that they will be remembered in 3 to 4 to 5 years, like after that experience down the road, when people start talking about the greatest defenses of all time. I think it's certainly within reason to say it's not off the table that Kansas City is currently building the greatest dynasty in NFL history.
Yeah, I mean, you were talking about it, them being one of the best defenses in the league. I mean, the fact that in this postseason they didn't let any quarterbacks they played over 25 points. Not only that, during the regular season, and I told you guys earlier in the week, they were the best defense in the second half in NFL history. And that was like throughout the year. And so I agree. I think they're one of the, like, for me, that was one of the biggest reasons why I picked them to win, because like this defense is playing all world. I thought they were a better defense than the 49ers this year. The reason why they weren't touted that way is because in the regular season, Mahomes struggled a little bit because his receivers were dropping passes. So the numbers defensively are inflated because the offense struggled so much. But when Patrick Mahomes, when his guys are finally catching the ball, like, that defense has a chance to play to what they really were, and that was the best defense in football. And I agree, they're not going anywhere. They are not going anywhere. You don't think that they may not take a hometown discount to play with Patrick Mahomes? I mean, would you too? I would take a hometown discount to play with Patrick Mahomes. I'm gonna get that money somewhere else.
Yeah. So to me, though, I think obviously, and I don't know, Savage might disagree with me. Obviously, right now, Mahomes doesn't have the accolades and the titles, the accomplishments that Tom Brady has to be considered the GOAT right now. But what I think we are saying is, hey, this is the GOAT. The achievements are coming, and we get to watch it. Just because we're ahead of the curve right now of what Patrick Mahomes is going to do, and just because he doesn't have 7 Super Bowls, he hasn't been to 10. Because whenever I hear about people saying no, Brady's still the GOAT because he has 7, I think, okay, those are coming. But I'm just telling you right now, we are witnessing the greatest quarterback of all time. We get to see that ascension. And guess what? We're only on year 6 of him starting. Like, that's insane. That's ridiculous.
Yeah, and I'll say one thing, and then Savage, you can follow me after that. Yes, he's only played 6 years. Yes, he doesn't have 7 Super Bowls. But was Tom Brady a 2-time MVP? Was he considered the best player in football for 6 straight? His first year of starting, he was already dictated the best player in football. How crazy is that? So yes, he may not have the Super Bowl accolades, but, and I know we're quoting Nick Wright a whole lot. We are. But this is the best 6 years straight a quarterback has ever had in NFL history, and it's not even close. 2 MVPs, 3 Super Bowls, 6 AFC Championship appearances, 3 Super Bowl MVPs. Like, yes, he doesn't have the Super Bowls, but he has everything else. And he's winning Super Bowls.
So you're saying you agree with us then that he's the greatest of all time then?
I think there's a strong case for me. For me, there's more to, I need to see it for longer. I'm saying like the longevity of it. I think if he continues to do what he's doing, yes. But like I think my hang up is he could get hurt tomorrow, and then this is like a moot point. But do I believe? I guess the better question is, do I believe he will be the GOAT? Yes, 100%. I really do. Because like Savage pointed out, are we really expecting a 10-year gap in Super Bowls for Patrick Mahomes? I'm not. I don't think there's going to be 10 years where Patrick's not going to win one. If I'm making, and this is not even a bold prediction, it's just a prediction. Barring injury, I think it's going to be a lock every season. Patrick Mahomes is in the AFC Championship game for the next 10 to 15 years, barring injury. And so, but I'm just saying, like, this first stretch is good because at the same time, I'm also thinking like Andy Reid's getting up there in age, so eventually he's going to get another coach. And is that coach going to be like Andy Reid, who's going to have his team ready to play? Because I think that could be a deterrent for Mahomes not having the right coach. That could be in the future. So that's
Savage. What do you think?
That's part of it.
Yeah, I would say here's how I decide to go. Daniel, you're not going to like this. So just know that going into this. If you were to take every player that's ever played in NFL history, and you gave me the first pick in the draft, any player, they're at their peak, who do I pick? I'm picking Patrick Mahomes, and I'm not thinking twice. I'm not picking Tom Brady over Mahomes. So, in my book, he's the GOAT. You put that in basketball, every player, all time, at their peak, at their apex, who do you take? I'm taking GOAT James. That's why I think he's the GOAT. You put it in every sport, that's how I decide who is the greatest. If I had anyone in the world and I get the first selection, who am I taking? Then they're the greatest. Accolades and stuff, there's so much of that that's out of control of the individual player. You know, especially in
a team game, for sure.
Especially in football, that it's, you know, it's not if on that blitz, McDuffie doesn't come through and bat down that third and 4 on that, San Francisco drive, and they pick up that third down, they might go on to score a touchdown there or kick a field goal. If they kick a field goal,
drain the clock.
They drain the clock. The game's over, right? So it's like so much of that is out of Purdy and Mahomes' control, right? And so, but the fact of the matter is that did happen. Mahomes did win, so he gets another ring. But that's why I don't subscribe to. I'm not saying this is you, Daniel, but I'm saying that this is, I would argue, the majority of sports fans. It is just as simple as how many rings do you have, and I don't think that's a full enough view of how you have to consider who the GOAT is. You have to take into consideration how good they are. People try to say, well, this is the most talented player, but this is the greatest player. No, that basically means that you think he's the greatest and you're scared to say it. Have some courage of your convictions. If you're the most talented, you're the greatest. Because if that's the case, then, Bill Russell's the GOAT of basketball, and nobody under the age of 75 thinks that, And so what are we talking about with that?
I think how I've heard it
with Mahomes.
I think how I've heard it said that I guess why I don't think that way is because before Patrick Mahomes was here, people said Aaron Rodgers was the most talented quarterback. Does that mean he's the greatest? It doesn't. And so I think it's a mixture of the two. I think you have to be considered the best player at your position for your era, but also with the accolades to back that up. Now, for Aaron Rodgers, he was considered the most talented above Brady in talent level. Does that mean he's the GOAT? It doesn't. And so I think for Patrick, what Patrick is doing right now, which is getting me to sway to that, is that he's both. He's accomplished and he's considered the most talented football player to ever live.
So what I would say to that is, real quick, Savage, is that I think what I would say to that is, I think that if Aaron Rodgers, after going to 3 straight NFC championship games, would have won those 3 NFC championship games and won those 3 Super Bowls, and he has 4 Super Bowls, we would consider him to be better than Brady. He probably would be the GOAT. One, because he's undefeated in Super Bowls, but we also looked at the earlier part of his career when he was going to NFC championship games or getting bounced down the division around, and we said, hey, listen, his defense is giving up 38 points per game in the playoffs. He's putting up 34, 35, sometimes 41 to try and get him over the hump, and he's not doing it. But because we do have those games to where San Francisco only scored 10 or 13. I can't remember what it was. They only scored 13, and you only scored 10 at home in Lambeau.
And then you begged for the NFC Championship game to be at Lambeau Field against Tom Brady. You had a big lead, and then you lost it.
And so because of those scenarios, even though we would say that he's more talented, we wouldn't say that he's the better quarterback of the two, because in the big moments, Tom Brady actually stepped up and did what he was supposed to do. With Patrick Mahomes, he's already done that. He's already proven that it doesn't matter what his team looks like, he's going to go win. Which is why I think we can't bring Rodgers into this conversation, because Rodgers had his opportunity to do exactly what Mahomes did, and he didn't do it. That's why this is so different, because we've already seen from Patrick Mahomes both of the things. We've already seen him be the most talented quarterback in the NFL, and we've also seen that talent produce championships.
And I think too, there has to be a difference between, like with Aaron Rodgers, I don't think anyone was ever really making, or if they were making it, I don't think they meant it, like actual claims of he's a better quarterback than Tom Brady.
No, not better, but I'm saying more talented.
Well,
like more talented.
I don't remember it being even that discussion of a more talented quarterback. I always heard a more talented like thrower of the football.
Yeah,
there is a huge difference between talent in throwing the football and talent of being a quarterback. That's like, within worship ministry, Daniel, it's like the difference between being a great worship pastor and the difference of being a great vocalist. Like that's a part of it, but there's still a whole lot more behind the scenes that you have to do to get ready. And what happened with Rodgers is that he wasn't able to lead a team. He wasn't able to galvanize a locker room. He wasn't great at keeping the off-field distractions to a minimum. That's all a part of your ability as a quarterback. That's like things you have to consider, is because of how much leadership is put on the quarterback. And with Mahomes, he's great at that. You heard Mahomes in this pre-Super Bowl week say if he could have to draft all time, his a team around him without any Chiefs, who would he pick? And he put Jamar Chase at wide receiver 3. Why did he do that? Because he does not want to give the Bengals any ammunition going into next year. He wants to, if anything.
I mean, putting him at wide receiver 3 would give you ammunition.
Well, but not when it's all time. I mean, this was
all time.
Draft.
Okay, I thought you meant in the league, right now.
No,
okay.
it was all time, and it's no one actually believes Jamar Chase is the third best wide receiver of all time. I'm an LSU fan, and I don't believe that. But saying that, it just he does not give anyone bullet board material ever. He leads his team. His teammates love him. There's never any drama circulating around. Any drama circulating around Mahomes is either his wife or his brother. It's not him.
Or his dad.
With Aaron Rodgers, all of the drama is about him. And so that's why he can't be considered a greater quarterback. Now, if you want to say a greater thrower of the football, sure, we can have that discussion. But there's throwing the football is just a part of what it means to be a great quarterback holistically when you look at the whole area of game leadership and clutchness.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, speaking of quarterbacks,
for context, what?
Sorry, Dan.
I'm sorry, guys.
We got to move on.
What I was saying,
we got to move on. We got to go. Yeah, so we'll talk about this in another time. But what we're going to be doing in terms of speaking about quarterbacks is we are going to have a series in the offseason ranking our top 10 current players based on positions. So it'd be based on quarterbacks, running backs, receivers, linebackers, defensive backs, those kinds of things. And we're going to set up criteria for each one. And today, what we're going to do is we're going to set the criteria for how we're going to rank quarterbacks. I've come up with a couple of must-haves in the process. And then we'll just quickly decide if that's what we want to do, if there's some other metrics that we want to kind of rank these by. And then we're going to ask our viewers to submit their own lists based on the criteria that we've set of who their top 10 quarterbacks are. But these are the couple of things that I've set in place for this. One is that we have to talk about the team success of the quarterback. How did the team do overall in this past season? What was their winning percentage? How deep did they go into the playoffs? Those kinds of things. Two what were the statistical achievements of the quarterback? I think numbers do matter, especially when we're talking about quarterbacks, of how they did, what was their completion percentage, yards, touchdown passes to interception ratios, turnovers, including fumbles, which some people like to forget about at sometimes. And so what about that? Also, what were the personal achievements of the quarterback? Were they in the MVP conversation? Were they an all-pro? As much as this has been lessened in value over the past couple of years, did they make a Pro Bowl? Were they considered to be a Pro Bowl player? Those kinds of things we also need to look at. But I think these next couple, I think, are the most important questions that we can have discussions on. What about the degree of difficulty for these quarterbacks, based on their schedule, who they had to play, based on their team construction, how was it set up? And also, I think the biggest thing when we talk about top 10 quarterbacks is how reliant was how important was the quarterback playing well? How did that matter for the team's success? How much did they have to rely on the quarterback to win them football games? I think when we talk about degree of difficulty, those are the metrics that I would use. Then I have, is this consistent between the previous 2 to 3 seasons? We saw this last year with Jalen Hurts. He had one sensational year, and we did some things to where we put him in. I'm just talking for myself. I put him in my top 3 quarterbacks because of how he played in the Super Bowl. And then look at how he did this past season. So over a span of 2 to 3 years, how has these quarterbacks played, and have they been consistent? And then finally, I think this is the one where we can talk about a lot. What about the talent or the potential of the quarterback? How much does that play a factor into our rankings heading into next year? But Savage, I'll go with you, and then Daniel, anything you want to add or say about this list that I've put together?
I think clutch factor needs to be one. Like how in the biggest moments, in the biggest games, what do they do? Some of that's lumped into team success, but I also think that's like more specifically like that last Super Bowl drive by Mahomes, the 4th and 1 scramble, the 20-yard run, the like placing the ball everywhere. I think like out of the 75 yards, he was personally responsible for 62 of them. You know, like that is big time, big game clutch. I think that needs to be one that needs to be added.
Daniel, what about you?
I think for one, not that it's an issue, but it is something that I'm aware of when talking about, is based on the degree of difficulty for a quarterback. The reliance on the quarterback is a huge one, both in a positive and a potential negative. In the positive, you look at a quarterback like Lamar Jackson, when he's not on the field, they're 2-8 without him. I feel like sometimes that can also be a negative, and it's not necessarily the quarterback's fault. Like a Joe Burrow, who when he was out this year, his team went 4-2 without him and averaged 5 more points without him. So I think I'm saying that to say, like, part of my analysis is also taking that into account of, like you said, team success with or without a quarterback. And I don't think you're gonna like this, but without Dak Prescott, Cooper Rush went 5-1. Like that's part of it, and how much of that is team strength versus,
well, yeah, I think
importance.
I think that's the reason why I don't think the Cooper Rush thing works. Because they only averaged 20 when he was on the field, and the defense was scoring just as much as the offense. So I can look at that and go to Cooper Rush and be like, they didn't win because of him. They won because of their defense. And I think that's the difference.
And so I think that's going to be important in a list like that, being able to detail and highlight just exactly, yes, they were able to win without him, but how did they look? How were they able to win without him? And so I think a lot of people, if I put Joe Burrow high and Dak high in my list was like, well, they went 5-1 without. They went 4-2 without. But how did they look? Was it because their defense was playing top notch and they were getting adequate quarterback play? Or was it that, hey, that quarterback took him to another level, not another level, but played the same as him, and that quarterback didn't make an impact, so type thing. And so it's just something that I'm aware of. And when I saw your list, that's the first thing I thought of when I saw it. But I agree with Savage, Clutch Gene. There's a lot of talented quarterbacks in this league, and I think I wrote this note a whole long time ago about quarterbacks, and I said, for me, it's one thing to be good / talented, but another is playing bad and then having the mental toughness to shake it off, make the plays to win the game despite what's going on around you. And so my final takeaway of that was like, a lot of quarterbacks in that upper tier, can they be mentally tough in those situations? So I think Savage is right on, like, Clutch Gene. That's a huge part of being a quarterback. And I think a lot of these upper tier quarterbacks haven't shown that or proven that, other than the two that we're all thinking of.
Mm-hmm.
I love it. It's a great list. I can't wait for these rankings. And then we're also not just doing this for quarterback, right? I mean, we're going to be doing this for other positions. And
yeah.
Man, I would imagine you're probably not going to give me the privilege of having an offensive lineman ranking show. But
well, I just didn't know how much we were going to do. I thought that would be something that we would
season's a long time, man. It's a long season.
Hey, if you guys want to do offensive lineman, I'm down to do that.
Yeah, there's going to be like 2 people that want that.
Yeah. Mm-hmm. But so here's the important thing, and I'm gonna put this on social media as well to get people's list, because we did this last year, and Daniel did not like the quarterback list that were given, because we did have
Savage.
Murray's.
This was before you got on the show. There was Kyler Murray, Justin Fields on their top 10 quarterback lists. Yes, that was my exact
was also on there
well.
too. Tua was also on there.
Tua was also on there.
Well, prayerfully, after being indoctrinated by me for most of the season, that won't happen again. They'll understand the beauty of the figure it out take and realize that Justin Fields simply not be on that list. I don't care what his fantasy football numbers are. Right? I mean, that's where we're at now. Just kidding.
Yeah. Well, and I hopefully, because we put this criteria out, people will know, hey, list your top 10 fantasy quarterbacks in the NFL, but actually do, hey, based on their performance, based on what they've done, based on this criteria, who are your top 10 quarterbacks? I think we'll have some better lists this year, hopefully. So if you want to submit your list, our Facebook is out there, our YouTube channel is out there for you to put it on. And as well, you can email us, and I'll put that email in the description. You can send us your list as well. But that's going to do it for us here on Double Take, an NFL podcast. Thank you so much for joining us here on season 2 and this past 2023-2024 NFL season. Congratulations, Kansas City, for winning the Super Bowl. But we'll be back real soon as we talk about our top 10 quarterbacks and start season 3. And so for Savage and Daniel, this is David for the show. Until next time, God bless.